All right, welcome everybody to yet another episode of Shadows Podcast. Super excited today. Jason Holzer is going to be our guest. Inspirational message. This is one that I have been looking forward to since we got this one on our calendar. He is a certified teacher, an accomplished basketball coach, an author, a transformational speaker, a husband, a father. Jason, thank you very much for taking time to join us today on Shadows Podcast.
Bodie, man, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on here, and anytime I can, get on a podcast and figure out how we can help people, I'm always going to take that opportunity. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And Jason and I talked a little bit before we hit record. I think some of the best stuff happens on these podcasts before the record button even gets hit. But
for sure,
we definitely we shared our story. We have some similarities with some things that have happened, and I'm looking forward to the message that he's going to spread to our audience, which this episode is dropping right before the holidays. So I think it's a timely message. I think it's very good. And we're going to get into some of his story. But first, I want to start off with a couple of rapid fire questions for you. Now, I know you're big into basketball.
Yes, sir. Yep, definitely.
I could easily ask you best NBA player of all time, and that could go one of, 10 different ways, but best college basketball player of all time.
Ooh, okay. Best college basketball player. I'm going to go Jackie Stiles. I'm going to go women's side. So if you look at her stats, man, she held the Division I scoring record for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And she scored in a Sweet 16 in 2001. She dropped 41 on Duke, and she went to my college, so maybe there's a little bit of bias, but she went to Missouri State, which was SMS at the time, so it was a regional college. She dropped 41 on Duke in the Sweet 16 and took him to the Final Four. So, I mean, Jackie Stiles is the best college player I've ever seen play.
Okay, that's a good one. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking women's basketball. That's a very good answer. Mine, I would probably have to say would be. I don't like to go with the obvious ones like Jordan or anyone like that. I'd say Len Bias or Hank Gathers.
Okay.
Yeah, those were probably two that stood out to me.
Yeah.
What book would you recommend anybody read other than yours? We'll get to yours in a minute, but
man, I got so many. It really depends on what you're going for. Like if I just read one recently called The Buddha and the Badass, which is like the secret art of succeeding at work. Yeah.
I loved it.
That one is, so much to unpack in that one. It's almost like you got to read it 4 or 5 times to really, gravitate towards it. And then there's a trilogy called The Science of Getting Rich, The Science of Being Well, and The Science of Being Great. And it's like 100-year-old book. I mean, and each book's only 80 pages, but the knowledge that's in there is timeless. Yeah. I mean, it talks about so many like practical things that you can just apply in your life to lead you to success and whatever your definition of success that you have. It doesn't have to necessarily be monetary or materialistic, but like, philanthropic or altruistic as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely, we'll put the link to those in the description for this. Buddha and the Badass. I'm glad you said that because I was trying to pitch it to somebody, not too long ago. And I was like, look, you've got to take some time you can't, speed read through this one. It's really, It's a lot of self-reflecting.
It is. Okay. It's good stuff, man, for sure. Yeah.
So talk to us about like your upbringings. Like I've heard your story on several podcasts but talk to us about like, what were some things you liked to do as a child? Some hobbies, sports that you played?
Yeah, man. I grew up in a rural Midwestern home in central Missouri. And I had, supportive parents. My mom and dad had been together for, since high school. They were high school sweethearts. Right. And, I have always had a passion for sports. I've always connected with sports. Like I just love to play. I mean, like it was something that I did and it was like timeless. I never, like 3 or 4 hours would go by on a basketball court or a baseball field or throwing a ball. And I didn't even know, it didn't even feel like it was, I felt like I just started. Yeah. So I think that's kind of like, and kind of gives you clues on maybe things that you should be doing in your life, right? Like those things that are timeless that you don't have to think about or like stress about. You just know like you love to do them. So I mean, I grew up playing like the basketball, baseball specifically, up and all the way through high school. So, and it's still something like I had a dream of being a professional baseball player as a kid. Now there's some things I went through my teenage life that maybe derailed that because I didn't believe myself, the self-image. But, that's a whole nother topic probably in itself.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'd go play basketball from like the minute I got out of school, did my homework and went out and played until it was dark outside. Um, but what did your parents do? What was their profession?
Yeah. So my dad, he was actually an electrician. He was a blue collar guy, a craftsman as well, man. He was so talented with his hands. Like, he was a carpenter. He had a lot of skill sets, and he had a mind that could like imagine and just create things, and make things work. I had a great work ethic. My mom, I was fortunate enough. She stayed home with us and took care of us. So again, it was a very traditional household. Um, but I'll tell you this though, my mom taught me how to be tough. She taught me how to be strong. She taught me faith. There's a lot of things that maybe get overlooked from stay-at-home moms, but man, my mom was no joke, man. She didn't let me get away with things. She held me accountable. So I attribute a lot of that to who I am today from what my mom had taught me.
Yeah, my mom was the exact same way. She was the one that tough at the time, at the moment, and there would be times where she would, you'd avoid her like the plague. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm who I am today because of her.
And it's all out of love though, too, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
now looking back now, I realize like she had a vision of who she thought I could become.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew like if she allowed this to happen, then it would only be a detriment to myself.
Yeah, and next thing I want to talk about, this is where it's going to get a little bit sensitive, and I really do appreciate you opening up with everything about us today. You and I shared before we hit record that both of our fathers were 42 years old, and talk to us about May 8th, 2003.
Yeah, man. Unfortunately, on the calendar, it's it's a day that I'll never forget. Um, I woke up. I was junior in high school, getting ready to end my junior year, and I woke up thinking like, normal day. The sun was shining in. It was a beautiful spring day. I got a week till summer break, and going into my senior year. For all the thing I knew, like things were well. But when I woke up this morning, I went in to get breakfast. My mom was like extremely upset, like more so than I've ever seen her before in my life. And she rushed us out of the house that day. And as a 17-year-old, I go, okay, like, I don't know. She just claimed she had a stomach ache. But I was like, I've never seen a stomach ache take my mom to that kind of emotional distress. And then so I went to school, and about third period, I get a call over the intercom, said, hey, I need Jason to come to the front office. And I was like, I talked about my book. I'm like, I didn't have a reason to leave. I didn't have an appointment, nothing like that. I could drive myself. I was 17. I get up there, my aunt and uncle there say, hey, your dad's been injured. Oh, we're gonna take you to the hospital. And I was like, okay, blue collar worker, electrician, maybe got injured, no big deal. But then when we left, like we went to the opposite way. We went to the country, which is where I lived out in the rural area. And so it was like my intuition kicked in. And at 17, like you're not really sure like what consciousness intuition is yet. At least I wasn't. But it told me like, hey, he's gone. Like I kept hearing that like from my heart, from my gut. In my head, though, I was thinking, oh, he's okay, no big deal. But deep down, I felt it. I was like, gosh, I think I just lost my dad. I didn't know how per se, but when we got in there to my house, my whole family was there, extended family. My mom took us back to my room, sat us on the bed, and she said, my dad passed away this morning. And I mean, to this day, I still like can remember exactly how it went down, and kind of the aftermath of that and the struggle that was May 2003.
I appreciate you opening up about that. I know that's hard. I still remember hearing about my father and my sister, and it's still, I think I replayed that moment of hearing the news probably more so than anything else. How about like after the fact, like the support system from family, friends? What was your mindset like?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate. I mean, I had some great uncles that really like were supportive, and some great friends. And I remember I've always been a man of faith, and I remember that one time I was on my knees and I was asking God, like, I just need mentors. Like, give me guidance. Like, just bring people in my life to help me. Because you look to your father in a lot of ways to help you, especially as a 17 and 8-year-old. Like, what does it mean to be a man? Like, what does that even look like? And so I don't know why I asked that, but throughout my life, even today, he's brought the most amazing people for me to learn from how, as I've gone on this journey, to help me in ways that I never thought were possible. The things that I see in my life now, I was like, there's no way I could have predicted that half my lifetime ago. And it's like, and I'm filled with gratitude today because of where I was at that time, even 10, 12, 15 years ago from that time, it's amazing what can happen when you believe that there's a cause and there's something greater, even when you're going through the struggle and the pains of losing a loved one.
Even the worst pain is what I tell people from losing ones you love. The worst pain doesn't necessarily go away, but it fades, and you're allowed to do things that really inspire and help other people.
Yeah. It not only fades, but you can almost turn it into an inspiration, right? You can flip it, right?
Yes.
And you have to allow yourself to feel the emotion, to feel the pain, to embrace it. But once you've done that, then the next question is like, what do I do with this? How do I take this and not let it to my detriment, but actually make it to where it's an inspiration. I can help. And if I help one person, then I've done what it meant. It doesn't matter how many people. Like, don't get caught up in the numbers. Just know that, like, you don't have to be somebody that has, millions of followers. You could just be like a smile to somebody next to you, a complete stranger, could totally flip their day. So I think we see sometimes like people who are inspiring, they have like The Rock that has the most followers in America or in the world. Doesn't have to be, it can be simple. Like, just who can you impact, who's in front of you right now?
So who was your who? And then also back then, what were resources were out there for you? Was there counseling or, and how is it different from today's day?
Yeah.
Age?
Man, early on, I had, like I said, I had a couple of uncles that just really checked in on me, took me out to dinner, made me laugh, like listened. And then there was a guy, I went to Young Life. I don't know if you all familiar with Young Life, but it's like a college
like a mentor program.
Yeah, it's a mentor for college students, mentoring high school students. So like they're a little bit ahead of you in life, but they're relatable still in a lot of ways. So I had a Young Life leader who, man, he was, like he's now a high school football coach, but they just really showed me like a great example of like how to be a leader that listens, a leader that is empathetic, that cares, but also like will challenge you once they built that relationship. So I had that early on, and then even today, man, I could list off 5-6 people that have really been great from a maturation standpoint for myself. And a lot of reason why I've been able to become who I am, because I've surrounded myself with the people that I want to become like.
Did you ever consider counseling, or was counseling ever an option for you?
It was an option. And your ego hits at 17, 18, 19, 20, and even sometimes today I have to check my ego. But at that time I was like, I don't need counseling. Like somebody that you're paying to tell me that my feelings, that, I felt like it was superficial, which I know it's not. I'm fully aware now that counseling is super beneficial. But as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, sometimes those are the hardest people to reach because of, a lot of things. But so I didn't see counseling, which now that I look back, I think it probably would have helped me out so much, and I wouldn't have had to experience some of the struggles that I did go through on my own if I knew that how beneficial it really was.
Yeah, I think it's crazy you say that, because I remember after my father passed away, my mom took my sister and I to counseling, and I remember sitting there as a teenager. I'm like, why am I here?
Yeah.
This is
you're like
but
this,
now
like,
as a 38,
what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I could be playing basketball, I could be doing something, but then when I get older, oh, absolutely, I would take that counseling in a heartbeat. So talk to us about the importance of, you talked about your uncles and people in your life being that strong support system. When I suffered loss, I know that there was just people I would call them on the phone and just talk to them. What's the importance of having that person to where you're not necessarily suppressing your feelings? You're able to just kind of be yourself and be able to vent.
Yeah, it allows you to get out of your head. allows you to just kind of release all those things that you got built up, because if it keeps building in your head, that's kind of the spiral that suicide tends to be, is like the enemy, devil, however you want to name it, like they want you to keep it inside. They want you to hide it. They want you to feel like you're the only one going through what you're going through. But when you open up, when you get the courage to open up, and I still work on this myself, like finding that courage to open up about the things that you're truly like working through, then people are like, oh, you too? Like, man, I just felt like that like last week. Like, you'd be amazed how many times when I got the courage to open up, I realized I wasn't alone. And just that feeling of not feeling like you're alone is a release in itself. You know what I mean? Like, whenever I started writing my book and telling my story, and I've had people like you, like, yeah, man, like this happened to me. And I was like, dang, okay. Like, so now we're in this together. Like it's like a community, a brotherhood of like uplifting people, trying to make us all like, feel like we're not alone, but we're not like lathering in our, but we are like helping each other uplift each other, like, get through the grind, get through the toughness to see the good on the other side of it.
And on the flip side of that, and kind of going to the prevention piece, kind of tinkering into that a little bit, people always talk to Batista and I as instructors, because we would teach suicide prevention. And even now when we talk to future instructors, they're always like, I don't know what to say to someone that has gone through a traumatic experience, or I don't know what to say to someone who is possibly considering taking their life. But talk to us about the importance of just listening.
Yeah. It's funny, like I have a 4-year-old, right? And there's a book that we read to him. It's called The Rabbit Listened. And it goes through all these scenarios of like, I think there's like a bunny that comes up and says, hey, let's talk about it. There's a bear that comes out like, hey, you must be so angry. Let's shout about it. Let's like tear off somebody else's stuff. And then at the end of it, there's this little rabbit that comes in and just kind of like stands next to him. And then the kid's like going through all these things, and the rabbit it's just there. And at the end is like, man, like, thank you for just being there. Like you literally just have to be present. You don't have to say anything, because I've been in that situation too. Like, man, what do I say? And like sometimes it's like, hey man, I'm here. We don't have to say anything, but if you open up, no judgment, just here to listen, man. Maybe ask questions like after they start talking, like, how does that make you feel? What do you think, what do you think would make it better? And then but they've already started talking at that point. You don't want to start off with questions, because people got to get out of their head first, right? Then you can, like, your guidance, your intuition will kind of give you some ways to kind of shift the conversation once people start opening up. But you got to give them the space to allow them to open up if they want to. And it may not be that time. It may be like, they may call you afterwards. They may thank you for it, so just not forcing something, just allowing it to come naturally, just by being present.
So Batista and I, when we were talking about having you on here, one of the questions that we kind of got to that we figured would be a really good one to ask is, oftentimes, you're told, hey, talk to your kids about suicide, talk to your airmen about suicide, talk to them about these kind of things. And typically we say, all right, I'm here for you to talk to me. Okay. But what would you recommend to, a parent that has kids in that, especially that teenage range, where they seem to be most vulnerable, because they're still trying to discover themselves, fit in, they're going through relationship issues, all that kind of stuff. And not just saying, all right, so we talked about it, you're good. And then how often would you talk to them about it?
I would say actions never lie, right? So watch their actions. If there's and again, teenagers are tough to talk to. Sometimes you get one word out of them at best, right? But you can follow their actions, and you can see like, okay, is there a significant shift in their behavior? Do they have an attitude all of a sudden that wasn't there before? And instead of reacting, take that as a mental note, like, there's something going on here that's different. And then timing is everything, right? So, maybe it's finding that right time to ask the question, like, hey, I learned this from a guy named Keith Ferrazzi. He's called it sweet and sour. And what it is like, hey, tell me the best part of your day, tell me the worst part of your day, and I'm going to go first. So you are vulnerable as a parent, as an adult, And that will at least open up the conversations. Like whenever you share like the things that you're struggling with and things that you're excited about, then you open the space for other people to share as well. And they might not that one day, but if you do it over and over again, then eventually they will. Like my 4-year-old does it. Like, hey, me and my wife, we do our sweet and sours, and he's like, oh, I got one now. And again, he's not 14, he's 4, but we have to be the examples to our kids, you know? And if we're not able to open up about our failures and our successes, why should we expect them to do it as well? You know, so I would say observe those behaviors and be vulnerable yourself as a parent gives you at least a better chance for them to open up to you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where people are like, it's such a uncomfortable conversation to have, but that's what you got to do. You got to have that conversation.
It is, but the cost of inaction is even more uncomfortable. So I keep that in mind. Like the end result of what could happen if you don't go through that uncomfortableness is worse. Like, because I see that uncomfortability in 2 ways. There's proactive uncomfortableness and there's reactive uncomfortableness. Proactive is like, I'm going to step into this space. I'm going to choose to do that, or I'm going to allow it to happen to me. And for me, every time I've allowed uncomfortableness to happen to me, it's been way worse than if I chose it on myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a exercise that we used to do in the class that I taught, and I would have a student go out in the hallway, and I would give them the scenario like you're PCSing, you're starting to sell stuff, but deep down you're suicidal. And then I would have a supervisor sit in there, and they would have to ask the tough question, but they have no idea what's going on. All they know is the person is PCSing and they're selling their items on Craigslist. And when we get to the end of it, they would have such a tough time coming out and asking the uncomfortable questions. And like, well, I didn't want to plant a seed in their head, or I didn't want to say the wrong thing to them, or I didn't want to appear like I'm questioning them. And we would always tell them, yeah, but imagine if you didn't, because the scenario I gave them out in the hallway was they were suicidal. And it was really an eye opener for them. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Proactive versus reactive is key. Talk to us about the importance of talking to them and not just going based off. So actually the dangers of social media, because I'm not sure if you read it, but there's an article on ESPN called Split Image by Kate Fagan. And it talks about Madison Holleran, who was a track athlete at Pennsylvania. And basically if you read her social media account, even her parents, it's like, wow, she's living a pretty good life. This Ivy League school playing D1 sports. But then it had an unfortunate ending to it. I definitely recommend reading. I read that to all my classes when we started Emergent Leadership Issues. But talk to us about the dangers of social media.
You know, I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, but it talks about how polarizing social media can be, and the algorithms that they use when they could use them for good. Like they could use them as like an opportunity to feed your mind positive things. But what it does is anything you click on, it gives you more of it. So like you're always affirmed on and you never really see the opposite side, where you actually learn and grow more by looking at other people's perspectives, because you are able to empathize more. In reality, what's happening is in our country is that you are fed more and more and more of what only you believe and people like you believe, that you build up this strong like division of like, oh, I'm right and they're wrong. When the reality of it is, there's not like right and wrong are very relative things. You know, what could be right for you may not be right for me, and vice versa. There are some absolute things, but I think the best way you can tackle social media is be conscious of what you're doing, like set timers on it, you know, because you can get caught in the, like, it literally like hypnotize you. It literally, like, social media can literally hypnotize you. So just setting a timer where it goes off, it kind of gets you out of that, like, you know, I call it digital hypnosis, you know. And then also search for ideologies, people that think different like you, to kind of mess up those algorithms as well. Like to kind of like, because again, they'll keep feeding you more and more and more of what you search for, click on. They know what you're doing. So it's almost like a big brother in a lot of ways. It's kind of freaky, but there's a lot of good things you can do with social media too. I mean, you know, so it's how do we make the shift in social media that is encouraging and positive, but not like, the guy said on social media that he thought the like button would be a cool thing. He didn't realize how many people would like measure themselves, compare themselves to other people based on how many likes they got.
Dopamines.
Yeah. It's that. And so if somebody has like 5 likes, another person has like 500, like, oh, well, like, I'm not them because they have 500. I only have 5. And so I would tell them like, hey, you know what? That means 5 people, that's 5 is better than 0. Like, only compare yourself to yourself, like, don't other people, that's their thing. So that's what I would encourage people to, is like, compare yourself to yourself and search for things that are uplifting and inspirational and give you different viewpoints, not just kind of what you think.
Speaking of encouragement, what would you encourage to someone that feels like they need to seek help? Because the stigma is, if I go to mental health or if I go seek out something, that shows I'm weak, or people are going to view me, or worst of all, we hear it in the military all the time, it's going to ruin my career.
Mm-hmm. I know I had that same like feelings of fear of what people thought whenever I was writing my book, right? Like, what are people, now that my story's out there, like, what are people going to think? And then it goes back to what I thought of, like, well, what can I give? I mean, not everybody's going to like you, but you can be likable. And the stigma of mental health is that mental health is a bad thing. Like, we talk about physical health all the time, working out, exercising, that kind of stuff physically. So, but somehow we've gotten to the point where mental health is like, we think mental illness automatically, when the reality of it is mental health is just like physical health. There's exercises and things that you can do to help your mental wellness as well as your physical wellness. So, I would say it's almost like going to the gym, like you're exercising your mind, so it kind of flipped that perspective of like, no, like, I'm seeking help. I'm seeking mental fitness like I would if I went to the gym and try to get myself physically fit.
No, I appreciate all the nuggets, the advice you just gave to myself, to Batista, and to our audience in terms of suicide prevention and recovery. The next chapter in your life, you graduated from Missouri State, which was formerly Southwest Missouri State. I think, right. When I was used to that when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And then after college, you are now husband and father. What are some things that your father taught you or instilled in you that you catch yourself doing today?
It'd be fun. Like my dad was a really funny guy. And so that's why him losing his life to suicide was a shock to everybody, because, he was a community guy. He volunteered. He had a great sense of humor. I didn't think so whenever I was 14 and 15, but now, like, I have those similar, qualities. And so I'm like, okay, now I kind of get it from a dad standpoint. Right. So I really try to, be a better husband. And I'm not perfect at it, but I did feel really good about the person I married. Like, that's number one, is like, be very aware of who you're marrying, because that could be your stepping stone to success or your detriment at the same time. So that's like one of the most important decisions, and not to take that or jump into that too lightly. And when you have kids, like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be messy. It's going to be, late nights, middle of the night, early mornings. But, for me, like, I can't imagine life without them. And so it's trying to eliminate distractions in my, like, sometimes I'll catch myself on my phone and my kids are playing. I'm like, damn it, like, put that thing away, because they're only 4 and 1 for so long, so really, like, be mindful and just truly soak up the moments, good, like the tough ones and the fun ones, because you're going to, like, remember those the rest of your life, so that's kind of what I would say as far as that goes, man. Like, I love being a dad, the hard times and the fun times. You got to take it all.
Our big thing around the house is be present. We go to eat, we play games or whatever, we're watching a movie. It's like, be present. Cell phones are not part of the family. Put them up. You can hang out with them later.
Yeah. And I don't know, have you seen the series on Netflix called The Playbook? Have you seen that? So,
yes.
So the first episode, it's Doc Rivers talking about how he got the Celtics to be united, right? On the phrase Ubuntu, which means I am as we are. So whatever I do for myself, I'm looking to do for somebody else. So that's kind of what we've adopted as my family. Like, hey, if I do something for me, then I better be thinking, like, how am I going to do it for my wife and my sons? So, like, really, like, that holistic, like, we are in this together. So I thought that was, hey, like, if it works for the Celtics winning the NBA championship, it can work for my family as well. Yeah, that's right.
The Holzer house, yeah.
Jason, I
I like that.
if you don't mind, Trip, I'm gonna jump in. Uh,
Go
After
ahead.
hearing you
Yeah.
guys talk, I think I'm gonna move to a flip phone after this, so I can be more right. But one thing you mentioned was the having fun, right? That's when you learn. But with youth sports, there's also more than just having fun, right? It's also teaching discipline, right, and working as a
Mm-hmm.
team. So you can relate. You come up with a game plan. You're like, all right, we're gonna do this exercise, this exercise, this exercise, because I need them to work harder to move forward in their physical abilities. But then you show up and all they want to do is have fun, right? And it's kind of just goofy, and you're just like, this was not the plan. What do you do?
Well, it depends on what age, right? So I believe that sports should be fun all the way up until, I mean, as long as you play. But when does it become like I really am focused in discipline and regimented, right? When does that happen? And for me, I don't think it comes till high school. I mean, maybe middle school some, but like 3 to 10, you're teaching them things. Don't get me wrong. You have a plan, you have a structure, but like one day if the kid's like, hey, can we play some knockout, coach? I'm like, you know what? Yeah, because it's about making memories. Like sports are supposed to be fun. Sports are supposed to be something kids want to be. And I think we get too wrapped up in like thinking like our kid's going to be like the next LeBron James. Our kid's going to be like the next kid to get a scholarship. Like if he practices these things now, he's going to get a Division I scholarship. And here's what the numbers show: 6% of kids that graduate high school are going to play college sports, not just Division I. We're talking NAIA, Division II, Division III, you name it. And then second part of that is 70% of kids are quitting a particular sport by the age of 13. They're getting burnt out. They don't want to play anymore because it's not fun. So it's about, I'm not saying like you shouldn't like challenge them and you shouldn't like, ask them to go a little bit better, but how do you teach life skills in the sports? How do you teach like communication, teamwork, things that they're going to need in school, in life, when they eventually have a family themselves, possibly whenever they have a career, have a job. Like, what are we using sports for? Hey, whenever you fail, whenever you lose that game, what did you learn from it? I like to change winning and losing to winning and learning. So, hey, you know what? We lost. Okay, so what do we need to get better at in practice to maybe get us closer to have a win next time? What can we learn from that? What can we take away from that? So I think there's a lot that we can unpack that sports gives us to teach these like managing emotions, like resiliency, these kind of things that I think that'll last a lifetime for kids.
Batista and I both, we were talking about the power of youth sports and how we both have been involved with YMCAs in the past. So for our audience, I have a two-part question. I'll ask you the first one. For our audience out there that has never heard of you, hasn't read your book yet, what do you coach right now?
I'm actually an athletic director for a school. And I coach basketball. I've taken the year off because of COVID because I didn't want to be around as many older kids with my young kids and just family safety. But I've coached basketball like the last 12 years, all the way from ages, high school to, 6th grade and everywhere in between. So I love coaching. It's been something that I'm going to miss this year, but it'll come back. I know it will.
Yeah.
And coaching it's a time sport. Like it takes a lot of time to be a great coach. So that also means like sacrificing your family. And my kids are young right now, so I didn't really want to sacrifice that part of it. I know coaching will always be there. And so like part of me was like, I value my family, so I'm going to act like I value my family. I'm going to do a little bit of smaller coaching on the side, do some camps, basketball camps, that kind of stuff. But so that's kind of what I'm doing right now, just athletic director. Yeah.
And then also, so a lot of those kids, some of those kids are around the same age that you were when you lost your father. So outside of just teaching them how to run drills or the fundamentals of basketball, what are some other things you find yourself teaching them as a coach and athletic director?
Yeah. Really emphasizing like how do you set goals that inspire you, making decisions that are benefiting not only yourself, but other people, because every decision you make has an effect on somebody else. Understanding how your mind and body are connected, like what you're thinking is actually like your behavior, those kind of things. Like I think raising awareness of our identity and that athletes tend to have an identity issue. And what I mean by that is when sports are done, they don't know who they are. When they're done coaching, coaches maybe too, When they're done coaching, they don't know who they are. They have a hard time giving things up because they're scared of the other side, because they see as themselves, they identify as an athlete, when in reality of it is they're a person that does athletics. Who they are does not mean like they are an athlete forever. You're a person forever. You're a spirit forever. Athletics is just something you do. It's not your identity. It's not who you are. But we get that confused a lot.
Jason, I like what you said about youth sports and balancing when to have fun, when to teach discipline and communication. And I think it's really important, especially to do it all the time, right? But also make sure it's fun. So I always like to do it when we're stretching, right? Get goofy, and then in the YMCA, we always, after we're done doing the activity and everything, have a word, talk about life, talk about lessons learned, right? And I think you can relate. And I just want to say I appreciate everything you do for the youth sports and opening up. And I will leave with one story. So suicide prevention, it could be an annual thing, it could be a quarterly thing, semi-annual. And we have those talks within the fire department, right? So I've been a firefighter for 12 years. And one thing one person mentioned in a suicide prevention class was the power of just opening up and communicating, right? And she was mentioning numbers with fire departments and their suicide rates. And then they asked the question, how often did you guys do suicide prevention? How often did you have these talks? And the ones that did the most, right, or had counseling sessions or just regular sit downs with each other had less attempts or less commits, right? So the power of opening up is super important. And for you to do that with us, two strangers, and we can relate to you and we can have some common ground. It's been good talking to you. So good luck on your journey. I have to get out of here. I hope we get to meet again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for being on here today. Appreciate it.
Take care, sir.
Yeah, I think, sir, you brought up something as we transition to your book real quick. But yeah, being an athlete doesn't define you. It's what you get from it. And, all athletes hang up their sneakers at some point. All military members hang up their uniform at some point. It's about those lessons and those people that you've interacted with and what they've taught you that kind of ultimately defines who you are and what you do with all that. So speaking of what you do with adversity and being resilient, tell our audience about your book, Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience: How to Move Forward After Being Left Behind.
Yeah, it's my story, like firsthand, on what I went through as a 17-year-old. I wanted people to understand like what it feels like to like the depths of pain, the different like emotions that you go from feeling everything to feeling nothing, like what that all looks like whenever that happens. And so it was more of like trying to be relatable, trying to be like getting people to understand, what happens as a lost survivor. Because a lot of times it's focused on people that like we're obviously trying to keep people alive by not suicide prevention, but what I think it gets lost sometimes is like, what about the people that lost it? Like, what about the people, like the loved ones that have to figure out what's next? Sometimes those are the people that get overlooked the most, and especially, after 6 months, like people are always, checking in the first 6 months or so afterwards, but the long term, like the post-traumatic part, like, we're talking 5, 10, 15 years down the road, it kind of gets lost in translation. So I kind of wanted to, be a resource for long term. That's why I call my book. It's like a post-traumatic growth. So I've used personal growth and personal development to help me through those challenging times, to understand who I am as a person. And so the second part of my book is just that. It's like the 15 things that I've implemented in my life to help me continuously like work through the struggles, work through the pains I go through, but also figure out how do I thrive in my life forward, even as I recognize what happened in my past.
I think it's remarkable that you did that. I know for me, I tried journaling. I tried writing stuff down. after the losses that I went through. But it took me about 20 some years. It took me until just recently with a podcast episode to tell my story. What do you think it was that drove you to share that message with other people?
I think it was a couple of things. Number one, when I got married, I decided like I wanted to be a great husband and make sure like what happened, like, it doesn't happen to me what happened to my dad. Like he lost his thought, he lost his like perception of, and things, just a dark cloud just kept like, it almost like from my understanding, it just seems like it shrinks your mind, and you feel like you're just kind of like almost claustrophobic. You can't get out of it. So, and then I had my two sons, and then I was like, I want to be present their whole life. It's not going to be, if I pass away, it's not going to be because of me. I'm going to make sure I'm here for them. I'm going to do everything I can. So I was like, maybe there's a way that I can help other people and help myself at the same time. And so writing that book was maybe one of the most therapeutic, healthy things I've ever did, because it got out those suppressed emotions that maybe were harboring that I needed to let go of so I could be the best version of myself. You know, self-care is important here. I think a lot of people think self-care is selfish, but if you think of like a glass and you fill water up, like you can't drink from an empty cup. So you have to fill yourself up so you have the energy to give to other people. That's why I take care of myself first. I get up. I'm the first one up. I'm meditating. I'm exercising. I'm drinking a lot of water. So when my kids and my wife wake up, and it's not every day, it's not perfect, but 5 out of 7 days, I am the best version of myself for them. And when I'm not the best version of myself, I figure out, man, I need 10 minutes. I need 10 minutes and I'll be back. I'll be better. You know, so it's like, for me to be my best version to them, I got to take care of me.
That's awesome. I like that with the water. Final question for you. Well, actually, before we go to that, because I was going to ask you this at the end while we're talking about it. If somebody wants to get a copy of your book, where are you pointing to?
I mean, it's on Amazon. It's also an Audible book as well. So the guy that did my Audible book for me, he is a radio broadcaster in Vegas, and he actually lost his son to suicide on the exact same day I lost my dad. It was kind of like a remarkable story. I put it out there for an audio book, like to get auditioned, and he reached out. He's like, hey, you know, I've been affected as well. And he told me when his son passed away. I was like, holy cow, like the exact same day. It was, you know, a lot more recent, but it was May 8th as well for him. So he did a phenomenal job on my audiobook. Something I could have never done myself. So yeah, it's on Amazon since I self-published through them. Yeah.
Okay. And then final question for you to kind of wrap up this amazing podcast episode we've had here. What's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself throughout this entire journey of your life?
Dream big. You know, when you dream big, when you go for those bold goals, like the resources come. Like when you have the faith to step forward in things that may seem a little scary, but are super exciting at the same time, like the synchronicities, the things like happen that are unexplainable. So I would say dream big and then take little steps forward every day. And, you know, have goals that you can meet every day. Like I learned like the author of Buddha and the Badass Vishen Lakhiani says that, you know, have self-fueled goals. Like if you were homeless on the street of New York, could you find love? Could you love yourself? Could you learn? You know, you go to the library and pick up a book. You know, think of like, what are the little goals you can meet every day to kind of give you that little bit hit of dopamine? Like, oh yeah, I accomplished something today. Because your big goals take time, and you could get frustrated by not meeting them at a certain time slot, but know that they're happening while you're meeting these little goals every day. So stack up those little goals, and you know, big things come from there.
Well, Jason, I appreciate you taking time to do this episode of the podcast. I think there's, you know, our goal with each of these episodes is to reach at least one person. And I think your message is powerful. I think, you know, the resiliency, the perseverance that you've displayed to do what you do, to coach, to write a book, to do these podcasts with people, I think is remarkable. And thank you, sir, for taking time to do this today.
Yeah. And one more thing is the best definition of resiliency I've ever heard is this. It's the ability to seek positive outcomes mentally, socially, emotionally, and spiritually, despite adversity or trauma. And I was like, Because resiliency sometimes is not like, hey, just toughen up and suck it up. Like that's not resiliency. That's a misconception. But it's the ability to think optimistically that somehow this is working for me. I don't know when, I don't know how, but if I step in that space of like seeking positive outcomes, even in my hardest times, you know, eventually something is going to happen that's going to benefit, that's going to work for me, not necessarily happen to me.
I like that, especially as opposed to the definition I'm used to of just bouncing back.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
The ability to see
awesome.
positive outcomes. Like, you know, it's not like every day is not going to be, you know, roses and ice cream. It's not. But if I was like, I don't know why I'm going through this right now, but I'm going to keep walking in it because I know it's going to benefit me at some point.
Well, sir, thank you. Amazing nuggets throughout this entire podcast. I look forward to definitely connecting with you again. If you're interested in the book, we're going to have that in the descriptions, along with, we're going to have some suicide prevention articles, hotline numbers, all this stuff will be attached in here as well. Thank you, sir, for this episode. We are out of time for this episode of Shadows Podcast. See you next time. Goodbye and good night.